Life began like on any other day. The sun rose slowly over Lisbon. Children laughed in the streets. Some lit candles for the saints. Others ran to church with their families. And the city, proud, calm, radiant, opened its eyes. No one imagined that by noon the world would change. Not because of war, not because of kings, but because the earth itself decided to speak. A force without reason, without warning, without mercy. What do we do when the ground betrays us? When the sea, the sky, and the fire turn against man? This is not just a story of buildings that fell. It is the story of faith broken and reborn, of silence louder than screams, of a city swallowed and a people who rose from the ashes. Before the bells rang, before the dust, Lisbon lived. And in one morning it was undone. It was the morning of All Saints' Day, a sacred moment when the living pray for the dead. And Lisbon was at prayer. The bells rang softly across the city. But beneath that sound, the ground held its breath. Birds flew low, dogs stood still. The animals felt it first. Above, the sky was calm, clear blue. But something was wrong. Some say it was just past 9:30. Others swear it was closer to 9:40. No one agrees. What they do remember is this. In that moment, Lisbon was still. And then everything changed. There was a deep rumble. Then another. And then a third. 3 violent tremors rolling in from the sea. They lasted 6, maybe 9 minutes. Long enough to tear a city apart. The ground moved like waves on a stormy ocean. Streets cracked open. Churches collapsed on the faithful. Walls gave way, chimneys tumbled. People screamed. Dust filled the air. And then silence. But silence was not the end. Something worse was still coming. Many ran into open squares, like the Terreiro do Passo, Lisbon's grand riverside plaza, searching for safety. Then the river receded. The Tagus pulled back, exposing its bed. And moments later, it returned. 3 towering waves swept into the city, tearing through the streets, carrying ships inland. Lisbon, already broken, began to burn. Flames spread through the ruins, fed by shattered timbers and wind. The Passo de Ribeira, the royal heart of Lisbon, lost to fire and ruin. The Royal Opera House collapsed. The Torre do Tombo, guardian of memory, was reduced to dust, its archives buried beneath rubble. And the House of the Indies, the empire's trade heart, vanished in fire. The earthquake's epicenter lay in the Atlantic, southwest of Cape St. Vincent. Modern estimates place its magnitude between 8.5 and 9.0 on the Richter scale. It was one of the most powerful quakes in European history. Shockwaves were felt across the continent, from Morocco to France, even as far as Brazil and the Caribbean. The first tremor began deep beneath the sea. It triggered 3 major shocks, minutes apart. Then came the tsunami. Waves raced toward Lisbon, fast and furious. And they didn't come alone. Fires followed the flood. Lisbon's destruction wasn't caused by one event, but by 3 forces: earthquake, tsunami, and fire. The earth had spoken, across continents. The quake did not spare the rest of Portugal. Along the southern coast, waves tore through quiet fishing towns. Near Lisbon, the port city of Setúbal was shaken to its core. Farther inland, the old stones of Évora and Coimbra cracked under pressure. Even in the distant north, the ground trembled. The quake reached Spain too, from the hills of Andalusia to the streets of Madrid. Across the sea in Brazil, windows rattled and walls trembled. This was not just a Lisbon tragedy. It was an empire trembling at once, land by land, soul by soul. Around 90,000 lives were lost, maybe more. Families torn apart. Whole neighborhoods vanished beneath the rubble. Many who escaped the falling buildings were swept away by the sea. Lisbon had become a city of ashes, haunted by silent smoke and screams. The King Jose I was never the same. They say he was traumatized, broken by what he saw. He never again set foot in a stone palace. From that day on, he lived in a palace of wood and canvas, the real baraka built on the hills of Ajuda. Then came the man who would take control, Portugal's own Marquês de Pombal. He didn't weep, he acted. They say his words echoed through the smoke. Bury the dead and care for the living. Soldiers marched through the ruined streets. Looters were hanged, escaped prisoners hunted down. He ordered relief, ovens to bake bread for the hungry, mass burials far from the city to stop disease. But he did not stop there. Lisbon was redesigned from the ground up. Straight lines, wide avenues, buildings that could resist the earth's fury. Troops marched through new structures to test their resistance, an early step in seismic engineering. This was one of the first state-managed disaster responses in European history. Lisbon was wounded, but it would rise stronger, smarter, unbroken. Lisbon had burned, the empire was wounded. But the earthquake shook more than stone. It cracked the certainty of an age. Philosophers asked why. Was it punishment, coincidence, a warning? It was then that Voltaire wrote in his poem about the tragedy, Lisbon, which swallows 100,000 souls in a day, yet they still ask if it's punishment or harmony. With those words, he rejected the blind optimism of his age. Rousseau saw a different truth, blaming the dangers of modern cities and excess. Immanuel Kant searched the ground itself, one of the first to study earthquakes with science, not myth. Father Malagrida, a Jesuit priest, declared it divine punishment, a message from God to a sinful city. The Pope offered prayers and kings sent aid. And across Europe, the Lisbon disaster became the center of debate. Not just about Portugal, but about God, nature, and the place of man in the world. No one expected it. No one was prepared. In seconds, a city of glory became a city of silence. The ground moved, the sea rose, fire consumed, and Lisbon was reborn from ash and memory. The earthquake of 1755 did not just destroy buildings. It shattered illusions. It rewrote laws, cities, and beliefs. In its aftermath came questions about faith, about fate, about the fragility of life. Because sometimes history is not made by kings or empires, but by the moments when the earth itself reminds us we are only passing through. And yet Lisbon rose again, not as it was, but as something stronger. A city rebuilt, a people remembered.